Okay, I'm here today with Dr. Anthony Dillon of the Australian Catholic University. Anthony is an academic and a commentator on Indigenous Affairs. Thanks for joining me, Anthony.
Thank you.
Now, for those that don't know, Anthony is one of those inconvenient truth tellers that swims against the tide of victimhood narratives that are so popular today. And so let me just read something from your excellent website, Anthony, which I think sums up your situation well. I believe that the current popular ideologies which portray Indigenous people merely as victims of history and white Australia, the invasion and racism should be challenged. I strongly believe that the only way we will close the gap between disadvantaged Indigenous Australians and the rest of the population is by ensuring that all Indigenous people have access to the opportunities that most Australians take for granted. To achieve this requires us all to focus on the commonalities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people as a starting point and abandon the myth that Indigenous Australians are deeply culturally different from other Australians. Certainly differences should be recognised, but only after recognising the commonalities. So I think, to me and a lot of people listening, that sounds like a common sense approach. It brings people together and rather than dividing them. So why is this such a controversial position to take?
Why is my position so controversial?
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of people out there who have a vested interest in promoting the victimhood narrative. It gives them status, and for those who buy into the whole victimhood ideology, it then gives them an excuse not to achieve.
Yeah. So Douglas Murray is a commentator for The Spectator out of the UK, and he often writes about issues to do with Islam, and he's noted that the Muslims that get most maligned are not everyday Muslims. It's actually the reformers in the Muslim movement. And this is something that you talked about and Jacinta Price talked about on the weekend, is that the amount of abuse heaped on people such as yourself and such as Jacinta is far greater than the traditional white on black racism that we see portrayed in the media. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Sure. What you just said is absolutely true. We live in a day and age where Aboriginal people are embraced largely by the Australian population. We celebrate Aboriginal things, and it's a minority who are spoiling it, who give the bad image. And when people like myself, Jacinta, Laura Mundine, Marcia Langton and others speak out, we are hated and we're seen as traitors and sellouts by those who have the victimhood mentality.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of those stories that we saw recently was, I just picked up on because I saw it on your blog. I think you put this out a few weeks ago. Was Ian Trust, I think it was, trying to introduce a card, which it's a welfare card designed to be spent on sort of the essentials rather than just anything you like. So Aboriginal communities have difficulty with alcohol problems. They can't go out and spend that money on alcohol. But there's a lot of opposition to the introduction of that type of card. Can you talk about why there's such opposition to it?
Yeah, sure. Look, okay, first of all, someone like Ian Trust is just a wonderful man. He's got a heart for the people. So you can't question his integrity. He's a smart, switched-on fellow. He's trying to help the Aboriginal people or help those people who need the most help. And I think what happens is as soon as you introduce a solution, such as the card or the Northern Territory intervention, you are highlighting the problem, and people don't want to know about the problems. So talking about a solution means you've got to talk about a problem. And those problems relate to child abuse, violence, drug use, alcohol abuse, those sorts of things.
Yeah. And the popular sort of, the way we sort of view Indigenous culture these days is that it's pristine and perfect and untouchable, and we can't talk, and we need to preserve all of that. But there's a conflict here, isn't there? Because if you want to preserve the traditional way of life perfectly, then that comes at the cost of not being able for especially Aboriginal kids to take advantage of all the opportunities of just everyday Australian kids take for granted, as you said. So how do Yeah,
Well,
sorry.
you can still live in this westernized world, call it whatever you want, and still maintain your Aboriginality, your beliefs. And if you want to live off the land, I mean, good luck to you. That's difficult. But Australia has a lot to offer, and just living the way most of us do, taking advantage of the luxuries and services most of us take for advantage, that does not compromise one's Aboriginality. And all cultures move, evolve, advance, just like the non-Aboriginal culture has. They generally do away with the bad or what was good at one time. They'll discard it to take on something new. And so it is with Indigenous culture, Aboriginal culture as well. You're moving on. We've got this, modern, let's call it modernity, 21st century living, and it has good and bad to offer. And Indigenous people should be invited to partake in that and choose from it what they wish. So even though there's bad stuff, as there is in every culture, you should still be exposed to it, but have the choice to reject it and take the good bits from it.
Yep. So there's sort of tough decisions that need to be made in certain areas of the country. Sort of, say, if we say outback Northern Territory, outback Western Australia, where you have Indigenous communities, you can't really create an economic zone around these existing communities. Is it the case that some communities, or at least some people in those communities, have to move, have to go somewhere where the opportunities are?
I believe so, and Stan Grant spoke about this so beautifully. I encourage people to look at the clip featuring Stan. And look, first of all, if there's a community in a remote part of Australia which is viable, which could benefit from the government pumping in a few million, then I'm all for it happening.
Yep.
But for those communities that are basically on a life support system and have been on a life support system for a couple of generations, and there's just no future because the numbers are small, the people there lack skills, they haven't learned about work ethics and all that sort of thing, well, then it's time to make, as Stan has said, make some really tough decisions. And now I'm not just saying just rip the people up and drop them in the city. It needs to be done carefully. It will be a huge challenge, but you can't allow the people to live there in squalor. And perhaps more importantly, what about the next generation, those kids growing up who just see the parents sit there playing cards, drinking, fighting? What about them?
Yep, exactly. So over the years, there's been no shortage of money thrown at Indigenous affairs. I think I recall Warren Mundine saying something like there's about 100 different programs running simultaneously. Some of them are overlapping. Some of them are in direct opposition to one another. I mean, what's gone wrong there? Is there no central sort of idea behind what we should be doing? Is it just competing interests?
Okay, there's a couple of things. First of all, you got the normal government bureaucracy incompetence that affects all populations. Yeah. So, even in the mainstream, you've got that ridiculous system of anything you want to do, you've got to make 20 phone calls and sign 20 bits of paper, and that's normal. That's ridiculous, and it happens with Indigenous people as well. So things get very slow, and the system's clogged because you can't get immediate action. But also, I think you have this other problem too, which we don't like to talk about. We have this umbrella term, Indigenous Affairs. And so therefore anyone who identifies as Indigenous, and that includes those people with 2 drops of Indigenous blood in them, come under that umbrella. And so you have them all lumped together, where you have many who are doing quite well, like myself, just raised in the suburbs, watched Sesame Street and ate Cocoa Pops as a kid growing up, no different to any other kid. Then you have those who are not always, but very often, living in remote communities who are often as black as your shirt,
Mm-hmm.
who have enormous potential, have these latent skills, but they're living in environments where many of us wouldn't let our dogs live in.
Yeah.
But money and services seems to be spread across the board, and rather than focusing at the bottom end, we tend to be focusing at anything and everything that has the name Indigenous slapped to it. So you end up having this other gap, which I've spoken about before. And this was a term I borrowed off Peter Sutton, who wrote the book
Right.
Politics of Suffering. Great book by Peter Sutton. He says there's this gap between those Indigenous people who are doing well, like myself, and those Indigenous people who are not doing so well. So you've got this, what I call an internal gap. So
Right.
forget about the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. Let's look at the gap between well-off Indigenous people and not so well-off Indigenous people, and close that gap. And look, just a further point on that. Sorry to ramble on.
No.
But with that internal gap, those at the lower end, they are the true victims.
Yep.
And so I've never ever denied that there is genuine victimhood within the Indigenous population. So those at the lower end, those who are starving, those who go to bed at night in fear of getting bashed, raped, or whatever, those who don't know where the next meal is coming from, those where the baby's born and born with FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, they're the true victims. People like myself and others who lead a pretty good life. You know, we have access to the same McDonald's you have access to. We dress nicely. We know that we could see a doctor today or a dentist tomorrow if we need to. We've got it all. We're doing quite well. We are not victims. Unfortunately, because we, those in the upper end are educated, are clever, have access to the social media, they will use the social media to promote this view that they themselves are victims because they're Aboriginal. Now, obviously, they're not victims of poverty or violence, so they've got to invent another cause, and they will tell you that they are victims of the white man, just simply a victim of white people because white people have white privilege, whatever that means. They're a victim of Australia Day. Australia Day gets celebrated, and that somehow hurts them. They're a victim of gollywog biscuits. So we can't call them gollywog biscuits anymore. So, they're a victim of, it changes day by day.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, isn't it? Because the cases we see in the media are things like Cindy Pryor, who is like you. She's a woman who has done well for herself in life. She has a vocation at a university. She's doing quite well for herself. But, then she, it's like trying to find racism under every rock you can because someone complains about a segregated computer lab. And now all of a sudden she's racially vilified. I mean, and then another, I think, instance, maybe one's a little bit different and maybe you know more about it, but the Bill Leak cartoon case, it seems as though a bunch of lawyers, ambulance chasers in this case, went running around to see if they could find some Aboriginals who were offended or at least get them to sign something that said I was offended. And it turned out that they were essentially coerced into that because it was eventually dropped.
Yeah. Look, many of them wouldn't have been coerced. They would have been only too happy to jump on the bandwagon. And can I talk for a couple of minutes about that?
Oh, go for it. Go away. Yeah, go for it.
Because it's something I do know a bit about. I'll tell you the story. Most nights I send out to my email network stories about Indigenous issues. 12 o'clock at night when that cartoon came out, I sent that out to my network because it was a great cartoon. And the context at the time was the Dondale Detention Centre, talking about the abuse of kids. And that needs to be spoken about. But no one was talking about the daily ongoing abuse of Indigenous kids in Indigenous communities every day around the country. And that's what Bill was trying to capture. and he got slandered for it. But anyway, I sent that email out with the cartoon, and my father, Australia's first Aboriginal police officer, responded saying, "What a great cartoon that was. Bill was able to capture the seriousness of the problem." And my father has seen what happens, not just in Indigenous communities, but non-Indigenous communities as well, where you have generations of neglect. Yep. But he has especially seen it in Indigenous communities because it gets silenced. Yep. So he could appreciate the gravity and the accuracy of the cartoon, as could many other people. It wasn't racist. There was an Aboriginal police officer in the cartoon.
That's right, yeah.
Nobody spoke about that. The Aboriginal father was holding a beer can, so the activists immediately assumed the father was drunk. So are you telling me if an Aboriginal person holds a beer can, that means they're drunk? Who's the real racist now? Who's really doing this? Who's really doing the stereotyping? Yeah. So it was just another opportunity for the victim brigade to cry racism.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like that cartoon becomes your own personal Rorschach test, doesn't it? You see in it what you want to see.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The philosopher Goethe, and I hope I got his pronunciation right, but I think you know who I'm talking about. Goethe said, people find what they look for, and they look for what they believe. And there's plenty of people out there who want to believe that racism is everywhere because it serves them to believe that.
Yeah, so maybe another example of that, and we could talk more broadly, because this doesn't just affect Indigenous affairs. We saw recently a report out of Canberra saying that the Indigenous crime rate had gone up, but the rest of the population's crime rate had gone down. Now, automatically, the activist types leapt to the conclusion that Indigenous people must be being targeted by the police, sort of racially profiled, if you like. That it's not that maybe they're committing more crime or the police have got better at detecting particular types of crime. It must be racism. And we see this everywhere. We see, for example, and when it comes to women in the workforce, if women are underrepresented in a particular field, we automatically leap to the conclusion that it must be sexism that's keeping them out. It's not choice. It's not choice that they prefer to do veterinary science rather than engineering. So there's this idea that every time you see a underrepresentation or a disproportionate amount of crime in the Aboriginal community, or as you know, if we want to take this to the extreme, as we said offline, there's a disproportionate amount of Indigenous Australians in the AFL. Now, are we going to apply a quota system to the AFL? Are we going to point out, well, white people being discriminated against the AFL? Of course, that's a ridiculous notion. But can you speak to this idea that we just leap on these statistics without actually looking at underlying causes?
Yeah, sure. Look, okay, now, just quickly on what you said. Different people have different preferences, okay? And you gave a good example with men and women. And there's differences, and boy, I'm glad there's differences between men and women because we appreciate those differences. Yeah. And you have a look at some families. In some families, they like a particular profession, like builders or something. It sort of runs in the family because that's what my father did, my grandfather did, and that's what I want to do. And so you could say that a profession of building is overrepresented in that family. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, different preferences. Now, coming back to the crime thing, yes, sadly, again, because you've got the race hounds who are just wanting to see racism around every corner, if there's a increase in incarceration for a particular group, a particular racial group, it's automatically assumed, oh, that's racism. Now, first of all, look, police are not perfect, but they generally do a pretty damn good job under what are just extreme circumstances. So for these race hounds, victim brigade members who want to shout racism at the drop of a hat, try being a police officer yourself.
Yeah.
Join the force, do it for a couple of years, and then come back and give us your opinion. These sort of people who have graduated from the Facebook Police Academy, who are there sitting on the sidelines shouting racism and all that sort of thing, get out of your lounge chair and get into the real world.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, exactly. What's your view of how the media portrays this? I mean, I made a video, and you've seen it of yourself. You went on the ABC. It was at the beginning of this year, I think, to talk about Australia Day. And of course, I think the people who brought you in obviously knew what your views were, but they probably weren't communicated to the interviewer, because she was quite stunned that you wouldn't jump on the victim bandwagon. I mean, how do you see the ABC as portraying these issues?
That's you summed it up quite well. It seems that the interviewer was the only person who didn't know what was happening, because during the interview she was so clumsy and awkward.
Yeah.
It was quite funny.
Yeah.
But I was brought in specifically because of my views. So there was a breakdown in communication there at the ABC. So your question is, how do they handle these things?
Yeah, I mean, what do you think the ABC's slant is? Because, I mean, the Four Corners show, for example, on the Dondale detention scene, it seemed to be quite slanted. Do you think that the ABC backs up the victimhood narrative?
Yes and no. They have done some bad stuff, but by the same token, they've also done some good stuff in the past. But generally speaking, they seem to be leaning towards, the victim narrative.
Mm. What do you make of, on that topic of Australia Day? We've had Darebin City Council. I think we've had 3 councils now in Melbourne say that they don't want to have citizenship ceremonies on Australia Day. I know 2 of those councils have been stripped of their right to perform citizenship ceremonies because of that. But I mean, I would have thought if there is a strong groundswell of support in those communities to change it, then okay. But it seems that those councils have gone out and solicited people that they knew would agree with them. So they sent emails or surveys to Aboriginal activist groups and pretty much nobody else. And then they come back and tell the community that they've got wide support. I mean, what do you think of these people? And by the way, these councils are largely led by white Australians. They're not Aboriginals at all.
Yeah. Look, let me make a general statement. Again, it's just another group of people wanting attention, wanting to be seen as the saviours of society. Saving the people from their terrible, saving the Aboriginal people from their terrible plight of seeing 26th of January called Australia Day. In a nutshell, and once they promote that cause, it's not too difficult to get some others to jump on the bandwagon.
Yeah. So I guess maybe to finish off, I mean, what can we do? I mean, you're sort of on the circuit. You go around to conferences, you talk about these things. There's people like Jacinta Price. There's people like Warren Mundine. What more can be done to get this sort of counter narrative out there to sort of quash this victimhood story?
Yeah, okay, good question. Well, for those people who are giving the good message, like Warren and Jacinta, support them, show them your support, and because these people cop so much crap that it gets them down, and just someone on Facebook saying great stuff or sending them an email means a lot to them.
Yep.
It lifts them up, it picks them up, and they've, along with me, have had some shocking stuff said about them.
Yeah.
So just showing your support is a really big help. So that's the first thing. Second, we've got to be prepared to call out those other phonies and promoters of hate, like what you've been doing. Yeah. So call it out. We shouldn't be afraid to call it out and expose the garbage when we can.
Yep. Oh, excellent.
Because sadly, those messages from the Victim Brigade go unchallenged. And, I think the average white guy out there, if I say something, I'll be accused of being racist. You probably will be accused of being racist, but you'll find that you've got plenty of other Indigenous supporters who are grateful for your input. Yeah.
Well, I think, I think a lot of fear today, people speaking out, is because of their job. You say something on social media and the next thing you know, your jobs or people are boycotting your business or whatever. And I have the freedom, because this is all I do, to sort of say what I mean. But my message to people is, I think these labels of racist are wearing off, because the people who use them all the time, I think they're starting to lose their effect. I mean, if you call every single person a racist just because they have a different opinion these words start to lose effect, don't they? And I think more and more people are starting to get the idea that it's okay to speak out. I hope so.
Yeah,
anyway,
that's true. Those words, racism, racist, are starting to lose their impact a little, but they still do have a lot of impact. Okay, It is, the accusation of racism is mud, and once it's thrown, it sticks.
Yep.
As the QUT students and Bill Leake found out.
Yep.
So yeah, look, things are changing, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yep.
Look, I just want to finish with this main message.
Yep.
And that is, with the obsession and preoccupation with all the trivial nonsense, seeing racism everywhere, wanting a treaty, what do, or constitutional recognition, or whatever, those are a smokescreen to the more serious issues. And let's not forget about the more serious issues. That is violence, the child abuse, the poverty, the crime, the filthy conditions these people live in. These aren't Aboriginal people. These are Australian citizens.
Yep.
So let's see them as Australian citizens who just happen to have Aboriginal ancestry.
Yep.
And if they're Australian citizens, that means this is everyone's business.
Yep. Well, I think that's an excellent way to end, Anthony. On the way out, do you want to plug your website? You write an excellent blog that you regularly update, and maybe your Facebook, social media stuff, which I'll put in the description of this video as well.
Yep, sure. Look, I have a page which is just a collection of essays and other things. I've got resources there. It's at www.anthonydillon.com.au. And I also have a Facebook page, Australians All at the Crossroads. And I'd love you to just drop by and give some feedback, say hello, make a contribution.
Excellent. All right, mate. Thanks a lot for being here. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you for everything that you do.